Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight on the not exactly rainy at the moment, but not the nicest evening after the beautiful days we had at the end of last week. I'm Lisa Beatty. I'm the mayor of Milwaukee. I'm going to turn it over to all these people who've done the hard work of pulling this event together, but I just wanted to put in a few words. Last year, then Mayor Mark Gamba brought some of these same speakers to speak to the Milwaukee City Council about natural gas and about, from the climate perspective, about how bad it is in terms of the greenhouse gas emissions from methane. What I learned, though, in that process was also about the indoor health issues, which I really had not heard before. And I'm actually in the process of replacing my gas stove. I found it very convincing, what we heard and what I read in my own reading. And it seems like we were just a little bit ahead of the curve, and about every week there's a new article about gas stoves, new research, different places, new efforts, and now the federal government has offered a lot of incentives to help make it easier to replace and upgrade. So hopefully you can get information from the folks here about that. But anyway, I think it's a really interesting time. There's a lot going on at the state level. There's a lot going on at the federal level. There's some states looking to ban new gas connections altogether, like I think New York and Washington State. So there's a lot of moving things going on. But I'm really excited about the panelists we have tonight to inform us all a little bit more about this. And the moderator tonight, Alma Pinto, lives here in Milwaukee. So I'm really happy to introduce Alma.
Thank you so much for that. So yes, I will be the moderator this evening, and I am a resident of Milwaukee. I'm actually Mayor Beatty's neighbor. And I also work as a climate justice associate with Community Energy Project, which is a nonprofit based in Portland that provides weatherization, repairs, and energy efficiency upgrades for our frontline communities, which are those that are impacted the most by climate change. I'm really excited to be able to do this work in a community that is leading the effort to electrify. So with that, we'll go on ahead and get started. Thank you all again for being here. Tonight's gathering is a conversation about the electrification of homes and buildings, or transitioning away from fossil fuels as a strategy for mitigating and adapting to climate change. Following from our last information session, we'll be sharing the latest details on the dangers of gas and the opportunities we have to move off of it. As Mayor Beatty just mentioned, our city has been a leader on reducing emissions and adapting to climate change. In 2018, Milwaukee adopted its Community Climate Action Plan, a roadmap to development with the overarching goals of moving to 100% clean renewable energy by 2030, decarbonizing buildings to have net zero emissions from fuel by 2035, and a fully carbon neutral city by 2045. Since then, the city of Milwaukee has declared a climate emergency, has begun moving towards fully renewable power, and has taken many other steps. In December, the Milwaukee City Council voted to pass two resolutions aimed at reducing emissions from buildings. The first commits the city to retrofit and electrify its own properties. The second resolves to restrict new gas hookups in new residential construction starting in 2024. With these resolutions, Milwaukee became a leader in Oregon, the second city to introduce legislation on building electrification. Although these policies are new to Oregon, with Eugene being the first to pass such legislation just last month, Cities across the U.S. and Canada have also been adopting building electrification policies as of late. For instance, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District just recently passed a rule to stop sales of gas, space, and water heating by 2027. The entire state of Washington now has all electric policies for new residential and commercial buildings. It is clear that these policies are important and inevitable. Just to be clear, though, these policies passed in Milwaukee are about city-owned buildings and new construction. Most Milwaukee residents won't be affected. We're here tonight to talk about what folks who live in existing homes in Milwaukee can do to transition to clean electric appliances. But there isn't a Milwaukee City policy in place right now that affects existing buildings. So tonight, our panelists will be going over the latest information about why we want to move off of gas and opportunities with the Inflation Reduction Act that are making it easier for people to do that. We hope to listen and to learn from our wonderful panelists, to ask questions and develop our understanding of these issues together as a community. So before I introduce our panelists, I'd like to go over some group agreements to help set some ground rules and expectations for our discussion tonight. First, I'd like us all to listen with open minds. We're here to connect, not necessarily to agree. Secondly, speak from the heart. There are no right or wrong answers and no bad questions if the words are genuine. Lastly, I'd like for us to hold space for others to speak informed questions as we all learn and process at different speeds. So please keep these group agreements in mind throughout the evening. With that, I'd like to go on ahead and introduce our panelists, starting with Nora Apter. Nora is the Climate Program Director for the statewide Environmental Policy Advocacy Group, Oregon Environmental Council, or OEC. Nora joined OEC in March 2020 after nearly 8 years defending and expanding cornerstone environmental laws in Washington, D.C., where she served as a Deputy Director of Federal Affairs for Natural Resources Defense Council, and as a legislative aide for U.S. Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon. Nora directs OEC on policy design and advocacy and manages coalition and partner engagement to advance climate, public health, and equity outcomes in Oregon. She also serves as a voting member on the Oregon Global Warming Commission. Next, we have Melanie Plaut. Melanie Plaut is a doctor retired from her OBGYN practice in 2016. She has worked since then on issues related to the climate crisis, especially where climate and health intersects. She works with 350 PDX and Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility, as well as other organizations. Her favorite quote from David Wallace Wells: "Everything we burn, we breathe." I'd also like to introduce Bob Jenks, who's at the far end. Bob is the Executive Director of Citizens Utility Board, or CUB. Bob started working for CUB in 1991 and has participated in nearly every major Oregon Public Utility Commission case since that time, including dozens of cases dealing with utility mergers, rates, resource planning, and climate change. He also regularly represents ratepayers before the Oregon legislature and at regional forums. Bob is the Oregon representative for the National Association of State Utility Consumer Advocates. He also is a native Oregonian and holds a degree in economics from Willamette University. And lastly, we have Eli Spevak. Eli has been developing affordable housing communities in Oregon for over 20 years, starting as a volunteer construction supervisor with Habitat for Humanity. In 2006, he launched Orange Splot to build new models of community-oriented affordable green housing development. Eli was awarded a Loeb Fellowship in Advanced Environmental Studies at the Harvard GSD, co-founded accessorydwellings.org, co-founded Portland for Everyone, and is the past chair of Portland's Planning and Sustainability Commission, where he still serves. And also, I'd like to briefly introduce Anne, who is from Safe Cities at Stand Earth, and will be helping me tonight with gathering questions from the audience. She left cards on everyone's chairs, so if you guys have questions throughout the night, please raise them up, and you can either ask them yourselves or Anne can ask them for you. All right, so with that, I will hand it off to Nora to start her brief presentation on the Inflation Reduction Act.
Thank you, Alma. Thank you all so much for being here tonight on this, not quite sunny Monday. Again, I'm Nora Apter. I'm the Climate Program Director for the Oregon Environmental Council. As Alma shared, for those who are not familiar, OEC is a multi-issue environmental policy nonprofit. We've worked in Oregon for almost 55 years to advance innovative and collaborative and lasting solutions to Oregon's environmental challenges. As Alma shared, I'm originally from Oregon, but I came to this role after almost a decade working in DC and having witnessed countless rollbacks of our cornerstone environmental laws and really devastating threats to our climate protections. It does not get old even 6 months after the Inflation Reduction Act has passed, talking about what this bill means and the opportunity that we have to leverage it and provide benefits to Oregon families and communities and local economies. This is a huge bill. I think everybody probably knows that by this point. So I won't have time to talk about everything, but I am really excited to give kind of a high-level overview in terms of what this bill means, how it's going to help us in our effort to provide healthier homes and buildings to support local economies and jobs, and really advance the fight for a healthier climate. So anyone tracking the Inflation Reduction Act has undoubtedly heard words like huge and historic and unprecedented used to describe it. And I really think it's worth underscoring that those descriptors are not inflationary. Some economic analyses have found that this law will result in at least twice as much investment as Congress has projected. So folks may have heard the roughly $370 billion used to describe the climate and clean energy investments of that law. That could really be more like $1.3 trillion, if not more. And that's because many of the IRA's most important provisions for driving decarbonization and lower consumer energy costs, like its incentives for electric vehicles or electric appliances or zero carbon electricity, are uncapped tax credits. So that means the combined investments in this law, again, could result in upwards of $1 trillion, if not more, in climate and clean energy. But a big part of that, whether it delivers in terms of investments as well as whether it achieves the projected 40% emissions reductions nationwide by 2030, will really depend in part on how much everybody in this room is cashing in on the opportunity here, as well as what our leaders in Oregon are doing to make sure that we're set up for success. So it should not be a given that this bill will get us to that 40% emissions reductions, nor that it will deliver on the public health and job creation and other benefits. We have a lot of work to do, and I am equal part thrilled about the opportunity and terrified by the challenge of implementing it, but we can do it. So I'm going to talk about just a few high-level opportunities in this bill for both individual consumers and households, as well as businesses. And some of the most exciting pieces, I think, really are the rebates and incentives for energy efficiency and electrification retrofits. So there's significant upfront discounts on things like efficient appliances, like heat pumps and electric water heaters and stoves, as well as incentives in the bill to support necessary related electrical rewiring and panel upgrades, because we know it's not just about purchasing the appliance, it's about making sure that it works in your home. And not all of our homes, unfortunately, have been built to support electric appliances. So I'm just going to review a few key numbers in terms of what we're expecting in Oregon specific to buildings under the Inflation Reduction Act. I think hopefully folks recognize this is a bill that touches everything from renewable development like solar and wind to climate smart land management. There's a ton of opportunity, but we're really focused today on buildings, of course. So some of these incentives in the bill that will help not only reduce climate pollution, but also address rising energy bill costs and create and sustain jobs in Oregon include $54 million for the Oregon Department of Energy to establish what's called a whole home energy efficiency upgrade program or rebate program. That's just an initial estimate. This is part of a $4.5 billion nationwide program, but this is what we can understand is coming to Oregon as of right now. That also includes another $54 million in rebates for high efficiency electric home appliances and associated costs. So that program will help low-income households cover up to the full cost of a heat pump installation. That's really, really huge. But again, this is something that's going to be administered by the state, and we have a lot of important opportunities to make sure that those incentives are accessible and that people know where to go, how to get them, and how to potentially stack them with other state or utility incentives programs to get the biggest bang for their buck. I'm going to name off a few other really big numbers, and then we can talk about what this means for households. And I'm also going to point you to a really great tool that I love giving a shout out for. So a few other numbers. So $30 million for Oregon Housing and Community Services to support weatherization and energy conservation, specifically for low-income households. $5.6 million in funding, again, for the Oregon Department of Energy to support other investments in clean energy and energy efficiency and resilience. And then in addition to those upfront rebates or discounts, the Inflation Reduction Act also includes new tax incentives. So maybe you're not eligible for an upfront rebate. A lot of those, again, are rightfully focused on supporting low to moderate income households make these upgrades, but there's still incentives that you can access through the tax credits, and again, those are uncapped. So those are new tax incentives for both individual households as well as businesses, a residential energy efficiency tax credit for homeowners, as well as tax incentives for energy efficiency in commercial buildings. So all of this will directly benefit Oregon homeowners as well as renters and business owners. A few others to note are new grant assistance for state and local governments to adopt strengthened energy efficiency building code requirements. And that's a really important one, again, that the state and local government is going to have to work on to capitalize. Okay, I'm going to wrap up. Getting at time. I guess what I would leave it at is that these are some really big numbers. There's a lot of opportunity. We need to all work together to make sure that individual households, that businesses understand where to go to access these benefits, that our state agencies that will be administering these programs have funding and support to administer them, and that we're adopting complementary policies that will really maximize the potential that we have for emissions reductions, for job creation, and for public health benefits. So, sorry I went over time, but happy to answer questions.
Thanks, Nora. So,
Hold it off a bit for, if there are
should we
any.
do questions now, or?
Yeah, we'll be doing
okay.
questions after each speaker.
okay.
Yeah, sorry about that. I probably should have specified.
Do you want to?
I can read it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you give us a timeline for the implementation of this incentives and rebates?
Yes, thank you for asking that. So the tax credits are available starting this year. So that means upgrades that you make that are eligible under those tax credit incentives, you can cash in on starting when you file your taxes next year. The rebate programs will be somewhat slower to get started. That's something that the Oregon Department of Energy is working to set up, but there's also related legislation that we would love for folks in this room to show support for, the Resilient Efficient Buildings Package, which as part of the suite of policies will help ODO in, again, making those incentives more accessible so that folks know not just what's available under the Inflation Reduction Act, but also state offerings for heat pump and incentives and otherwise. So that will be a little bit more TBD, probably later this year, but probably more like early next. And you did remind me, Rewiring America, would love everybody to go check out that table if you have not already. Has incredible information in terms of what you are eligible for based on your income bracket and where you live, and also has some additional information around timelines.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the health risks of methane, but before I focus specifically on gas stoves, I want to talk about other ways that methane can affect our health. So you probably know that methane is a greenhouse gas and worsens our warming planet, leading to droughts, floods, wildfires, and of course, all of those things affect our health. So methane, starting from the big picture, has that negative impact. There's also the possibility of an explosion. They don't happen all that often, but if you start to watch the news, you'll see that, every few days there's a story about some place where there was a methane explosion, a natural gas explosion somewhere. The most recent one that we had here in the Portland metro area was in Northwest Portland in 2016, which, thank God, nobody was killed, but there were some injuries and there was a lot of property damage. And then thirdly, there is air pollution from the appliances that we have in our homes. So our furnaces, our hot water heaters, the same kind of things that we're going to talk about in a minute that affect our indoor air quality, those things go outside and they play a role in the fact that we don't have great air quality here in Portland and Milwaukee. It could be a lot better if we could get off of some of those fossil fuels. And then the third one, which might seem a little far away, but there are health impacts from the sources of methane. It comes from fracking. And although we don't have fracking here in Oregon, I think we do bear some responsibility from that end of the pipeline. If you think about it, that's one end of the pipeline, and the other end of the pipeline is the gas stove in our kitchens. Okay, but from the fracking side, we know that people who live close to fracking wells have worse health outcomes. For instance, an increase in premature births and an increase in childhood leukemia. Now, when we get to stoves, so gas stoves only use about 3% of the methane that comes into our homes if we're using gas, but they're the only appliance that is not vented to the outside. So when you think about it, your furnace has a vent to the outside, your hot water heater has a vent to the outside, but your gas stove is only vented to the outside if you turn on your hood, and if you have a proper hood that is actually going to the outside and not just recirculating things in your home. I was surprised recently. I've been, for the first time since COVID, in a bunch of my friends' homes, and I noticed that a lot of them didn't have a hood, or they cooked me breakfast and didn't turn it on, or they had a hood that was not vented to the outside. So I think a lot of people have improperly vented gas stoves. Now, just to be clear, any kind of cooking creates particulate matter. So particulate matter is the stuff, you fry your fish or whatever, and it gets stinky, and you probably are turning on your vent if you're doing something like that. But it turns out that with gas stoves, you have an increase in the amount of particulate matter. Now, particulate matter is not good for our health. It's these really, really tiny particles, thinner, smaller than a hair, and it gets into your lungs and into your bloodstream and even into the placenta of pregnant women. And it's been shown to have quite a few negative health impacts, such as premature death in, people our age, increase in heart attacks and strokes. Particulate matter has also been associated with negative neurological effects. It's bad for our brains, too. So Alzheimer's disease, teenage depression, and it was actually studied and shown that when the air pollution is bad, umpires don't make good calls, okay? Yeah, so not good for us. So again, you know, all cooking creates particulate matter, but more with a gas stove. Now, the one thing that's gotten a lot of attention recently is the nitrogen dioxide. And nitrogen dioxide actually doesn't come from the methane gas when it's burned in your stove. What it is it comes from the high temperature combustion affecting the nitrogen and the oxygen that are already in the air. And nitrogen dioxide has been known since the 70s. It's another component of exhaust. So like car exhaust is made up of particulate matter, nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide. It's the same stuff that your gas stove produces. So nitrogen dioxide has been known to be harmful to health since the 70s. And there are outdoor standards. 100 parts per billion is the outdoor standard. There are no indoor standards in the US for nitrogen dioxide levels, even though we spend 90% of our time indoors. The EPA asked the Consumer Product Safety Commission in the 80s to do something about this and said, you need to look at gas stoves. There's a problem with gas stoves. So even though there's been this recent kerfuffle and all this media attention and everything, this is not something new. It's been known about for a long time. And especially the effect on kids' asthma has been well understood for at least 20 years. There are multiple studies that connect gas stoves and pediatric asthma. The thing that is relatively new is we now know that even when your stove is not turned on, it is leaking methane. So 24/7, if you have a stove in your home, it is leaking small amounts of methane. Not enough to cause an explosion. But the worrying thing is that in the two studies that have been done, one in the Boston area and one in California, this methane was contaminated with known carcinogens. So chemicals that cause cancer, like benzene, which has been associated with especially blood cancers like leukemia and lymphoma. So a lot of this is pretty horrible and pretty scary. Luckily, we have great alternatives. We have regular electric stoves and we have induction stoves. And I think I'll leave it to the questions maybe for what we can do if you're not ready to replace your gas stove. But I have a whole list of things you can do to keep yourself safer while you're thinking about what you're going to do. And I'm going to pass it on to Bob. Oh, is one question?
Yeah, I do. Can I bring it around so we can?
I'm just curious if you know, is it on? Okay. If you know the difference, I know the gas stove stuff, but what about the electric power plants that are powered by gas? Because we have
Yeah.
at least two right on
Yeah.
our Columbia River. And my concern is we've talked about getting rid of dams to save our fish. And now we're talking about getting rid of gas. What is our multi-use?
What are we going to do? Yeah.
Well, if I don't want to become like Europe where they're talking about blackouts.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we're only focusing on one thing. So
Yeah.
how dangerous are the gas-powered power plants? And are we going to need more of them as we keep electrifying?
Yeah, you know, I think it's a good question, and probably some other people on this panel could have a good answer, but I'll try to answer it, which is nobody's talking about taking out our big dams. We have big dams that are going to, you know, Bonneville, going to continue to supply us with carbon-free hydropower for many, many years. So we do have legislation in Oregon that basically says our electric power needs to get cleaner and cleaner over the next 2 decades. And it's going to be really an increase in solar and in wind. Nobody's going to be building, that I have heard, new gas plants. So I think we're on a good trajectory here in the Northwest. We're actually very lucky because we have so much hydropower as our baseline, and we have the ability to get more solar and wind. So as we clean up our electrical supply, which is going to happen slowly, you know, none of this is going to happen like that overnight. Well, electric cars will clean up the cars, so yeah, I think that would be the answer. I hope that answers your question to some degree.
else want to take a crack?
Yeah, no, I can, and just, in Oregon, the law doesn't allow you to build any more gas plants. So the gas plants that we have now are the maximum amount of gas plants that can happen, and under the 2021, the electric utilities have to reduce emissions to 0 by 2040, so they're gonna have to start dispatching the existing gas plants less. So we're gonna see gas generation for electricity decline over the next 15 years and be replaced by wind, solar, battery storage, offshore wind, wind from Wyoming and Montana, and a variety of other resources that combine to make a reliable grid without fossil fuels.
Is that reasonable at this point? I'm just wondering how reasonable it is, because my understanding from the last article I had read, and it may be outdated, is that our wind power plants around the gorge were failing, or at least not producing what they should. I think the nuclear fission, or is it fusion, I think, that's a phenomenal concept, but it's probably a decade away. My concern is, I have an electric vehicle, so what does that do? Am I contributing to our drain on our electric system if we're not figuring out ways to keep powering?
Right.
So if we completely electrify everything.
And we are figuring that out. I spend most of my life at the PUC. I spend a lot of time in integrated resource plans with electric utilities. We are working on that. We are solving that problem. I worry more about the gas side than I do about the electric side. We have a lot of renewable power here. We also have very dispatchable hydro that most of the rest of the country doesn't have. So we're in pretty good shape in this part of the region. We do have work to do to get there, but I don't think the electric grid is really our problem at this point. I think we can deal with those problems. It's really a diversity of resources. The gorge wind isn't enough. We need wind in Montana. We need wind in Wyoming. We need wind offshore because it blows at different times. And if you do that, the modeling shows we can build a very reliable grid. You add in some storage and other things. And remember, the hydro system is storage. The hydro system is one hell of a big battery that the rest of the country doesn't have that can be used to meet our peak resources. But what I wanted to talk about was the gas side, because that to me is a bigger problem. My name is Bob Jenks. I'm with the Oregon Cub. We're an advocate for residential ratepayers. We were started by initiative in 1984, and our estimation is since we began, we've saved customers about $9 billion off electric, gas, and telephone bills. Under current Oregon law, the gas utilities have to reduce emissions by 50% by 2035, 90% by 2050. To do that, what essentially they have to do is reduce emissions between 3 and 4% per year for the foreseeable future, plus reduce 100% of the emissions from any load growth that happens. And there's only two ways with current technology you can do that. The first is renewable natural gas. The second is by reducing the demand for natural gas. The first, renewable natural gas, is really, really expensive. There's two types: the cheaper stuff, the stuff that comes from landfills, wastewater treatment plants and factory farms. Northwest Natural projects that that'll cost about $12 a therm. The more expensive stuff that is coming from gasification of biomass will cost about $18 per therm. In recent years, fossil gas has been going for between $2 and $4. So the fuel that's going to be starting to be added to our pipelines to replace the fossil gas is going to cost 4 to 6 times as much. And that's all going to be reflected in our gas bills as gas customers. Customer bills are going to go up. But the real problem isn't the price of renewable gas, it's the availability. You can't go out and buy large quantities. There's not really a developed liquid market for it. Gas utilities have to go out and develop their own RNG projects. Northwest Natural just filed to bring a new one into rates. It's called the Dakota City Project. It costs $12.5 million and will provide enough RNG to serve 0.14% of Northwest Natural's load. That's 14/100ths of 1%. That's a tiny amount. If you brought in here and put 3 cases of beer, full cases, 72 bottles, 864 ounces, and I opened one and drank 1 ounce, that's 14/100ths of that beer. That's the amount that this project is bringing to the gas system. When you look at what they need to meet the Oregon climate goals, to meet the regulations that they have to meet, they would have to develop 30 of these every year up until 2035. But they also want to keep growing. They're projecting 1.2% customer growth per year. You add that in, and they have to do 35 of these kinds of projects every year to be able to meet the demand with renewable gas. Now, what is this Dakota City project? Dakota City is Tyson Foods' largest meat packing plant. It's their largest. It employs 4,500 people. This is a big facility. And you got to do, again, 35 of these each year if you're going to be able to sort of meet the requirements of Oregon's decarbonization law. I don't think that's possible. Decarbonizing the system with RNG, with renewable natural gas, is going to be really, really expensive. And it's going to be really, really difficult because the availability just isn't there. The other way you can decarbonize the gas system is by reducing demand for gas. And the best way you do that is through electrification. The renewable electricity doesn't cost more than fossil electricity. Renewable electricity right now is cheaper than electricity generated by coal. So you're not going to have the same price impacts on the electric side by having people move to renewable electricity. And the first place when we're talking about electrifying the gas system is new buildings. Milwaukee's got this right. I applaud Milwaukee for focusing on this. Electrifying new buildings doesn't just reduce the demand for gas, it reduces the capital investment you need to expand that gas system. And when somebody puts in gas in a new home, that gas line that hooks up that home has a 58-year useful life. 58 years, that's 2081. Do we think people are going to be buying gas and using that pipe in 2081 and helping to pay that pipe off? So it's clear that that's a place we need to focus on. And for people who live in existing buildings like me, I have a gas furnace in my house. We have to start thinking about what does this future mean for us. You can add a heat pump, and you can retain your gas furnace if you add a heat pump and use that gas furnace for a backup heat. That'll reduce your emissions from gas by about 80%. And that'll also protect you a lot from the price increases that you're going to see as the renewable natural gas gets added, and it's going to reduce the need for that renewable gas and reduce that price impact. The other thing you can do is if you have a gas furnace is you can wait till it breaks and then replace it. You may need to go to a higher capacity gas system if you don't have the gas furnace to back it up. But all of us should start thinking about, all of us existing gas customers should think about what are the decisions we're going to make? How are we going to transition out? Because staying on that gas system is going to get really, really, really expensive. And the better alternative is heat pumps. My gas furnace is 96% efficient, but a heat pump is 250 to 300% efficient. And efficient there means how much of the energy content of that fuel is converted to heat. A heat pump defies the laws of thermodynamics. You shouldn't be able to have something that's 250% efficient, but a heat pump isn't generating heat with the electricity. A heat pump is moving heat with that electricity. And can move heat into your house in the winter and can move heat out of your house in the summer and provide efficient cooling. And as Nora said, the federal government is here to help. They're adding millions and millions of dollars of incentives in terms of tax credits, in terms of rebates that you'll be able to get later this year and help pay for this. So my biggest concern, I'm a consumer advocate. Other folks up here are here to save the planet. I'm here to save customers money. I believe in saving the planet too, don't get me wrong. I've got an electric vehicle, I believe in this stuff, but my job is to protect customers. And I really am worried right now. If somebody buys a new furnace today, goes out and buys a new natural gas furnace, they're committing to that gas system for the next 20 years. But they're doing it based on the recent experience of gas costs in this $2 to $4 range. They're going to be running that furnace in a much different cost environment on the gas side. And they're going to have to put up with those bills. And that really, really worries me. What I'm here to really say for electrification is everyone ought to start thinking about this. How do you transition your own home to a lower cost, cleaner fuel that we're going to need as we go forward into the 21st century? Thank you.
You get one question, I think.
Oh, okay.
Do we have a question? Let me just get you the microphone.
Just clarification to see if I understand this right. You're saying that we're going to be forced to use renewable gas, therefore the price is going to go up?
Yes. Right now, under the state rules, gas companies, gas utilities have to reduce their emissions by 90% by 2050. They have to reduce emissions every year for their system. And the way they do that is to add renewable gas or to get people to stop buying their gas. They don't seem to want to get people to stop buying their gas very much. So that leaves renewable gas as the current alternative. Now, they claim there's future technology that will change that in terms of hydrogen and synthetic gas, but right now the two choices are renewable gas or reducing the demand for gas. And renewable gas is going to raise the price of gas service really significantly as we go forward.
Or if a whole bunch of people's price of gas goes super high, they'll start lobbying to allow for natural gas to be used again?
If you believe in climate change, that in the face of climate change in 2030 or 2032, after we have more wildfires and more other stuff, that the politics of this will change, where people will be able to repeal climate laws and say, let's keep burning fossil fuels more than we have, that's a risk you can take in your own home. I'm not willing to take that risk.
Neither am I, but I can imagine a lot of people would if you don't have the money.
That's why take advantage of the federal dollars.
Yeah.
Should I jump in? We'll take questions in the end, I guess, for all, so we'll still get it. So I'm Eli Spevak, I'm a builder. Affordable housing, and I built about 100 some odd homes on my own. And I am representing, though, Families for Climate has a program called Electrify PDX, and we get the fun job of, one is having props, and the other is to share what people can do in their own homes. So our mission is to help people power their homes with clean energy, and to let people know that you don't have to wait. The stage is set. The public subsidies are there, as Nora shared. Those are the federal resources. Those can be bundled with Energy Trust of Oregon, local Oregon incentives, so that the cost of replacing that gas furnace becomes, with a heat pump system, becomes at par or less than putting a new gas furnace in. We're already there. And people can get their electricity from renewable sources today. So it's great that the grid is cleaning up. It will be clean, in the next 15, 20 years, but you don't have to wait for that. If you don't want to be sending money to fossil fuel companies, you want to get clean energy now, you don't have to wait. So we have developed a program that is inspired by Backyard Habitat program, if you've heard of that, to recognize that people are already making these changes. They're already electrifying their homes, renters and owners, not just owners. And it's largely invisible from the street, so you don't see people doing it. If you're kind of a construction geek and you notice something that looks like a gutter showed up on the neighbor's house, that's actually a heat pump, right? If some outdoor unit shows up, like, you can't tell it's happening. It's not very visible. I used to do a lot of work with accessory dwelling units, like granny flats. Once again, very popular, invisible from the street. So the way to let people know about it is with signage and education. So introducing, so this is Electrify PDX. We have it in Spanish, Nos vamos a electrificar, and English, like this. We're going electric for a healthy home and planet. And here's how it works. If you even have the inclination, the tendency, the idea you might want to electrify, you sign up and get a sign. $25, not much. And then as you take each step, you apply a badge, right? A sticker, right? And it becomes more colorful, more beautiful as you apply each sticker. But you don't have to wait, because the first sticker you can apply is getting your electricity from clean sources. Now, some people have a roof that faces the right direction and is not shaded. So maybe, and a tax liability to use the tax rate. So maybe you're going to put PV on your house, or maybe you already did. That's great. But most people, that's not the case. You don't own your roof or whatever. So instead, you either sign up for a green power program through PGE has one, Pacific Power has one, or you save some money and sign up for community solar, which is now a matter of about 10 minutes with an online form. Our website shows you how to get there, and you become a customer of a solar farm. And you just put in your account number or a copy of your bill. They look at your past usage for the past year, and they sign you up for 80% of your usage. And then once the solar farm is built, and they're building them right now in Pacific Power territory and PGE territory, then you get your electricity from there, and your bill goes down 5%. Pretty nice, eh? Or if you're low or moderate income, your bill goes down like 30%. It's a great program. And the reason why is it such a good deal is because the state subsidizes it. I mean, it's because it was very important in Oregon that people should be able to get clean energy, whether they own a house and a big tax liability or they're renting, or they have a business. Anyone with an electric bill, even if you have a tiny house with an electric bill, you can sign up, and it's really fast. So that's how you get your perhaps first, off-site renewable sticker. The other ones are a little bit more work, your heating and cooling system. And I think there's a good question about like load on the grid. Many people in Oregon have electric resistance heat. One member of our program, she has a mobile home in a rented park, and she went from resistance heat to a heat pump, and her electric bill went down from $300 a month to $100 a month in the winter because it's that much more efficient. So there are some things with electrification that will actually decrease the load on the system. Overall, it'll increase it because people have cars and stuff like that. So heat pump options are out there to switch to, either from resistance electric or from gas. Appliances, that's one of the stickers here, right? That's your range in the kitchen. That's your dryer, if people have gas dryers out there. I mean, the best thing is just, hang your clothes out, right? But you can get an electric dryer too, and you can get a heat pump dryer as well. Then we've also got the heat pump water heater, right? Water heaters, I'm a builder. I was shy of using heat pump water heaters because I'm leery of new technology, and I don't want to have customer defects and noise and stuff like that. And I put them into my last project, 23 homes, and they were a little bit noisy, and you couldn't Wi-Fi control them. Now that's past technology. Now they're available, they're much quieter, and you can, if you have any kind of noise sensitivity, you can just make it turn off at night when you're sleeping. So heat pump water heaters is a great option. If you're thinking about your appliance, your heating system and your water system, and you already have gas right now, and I said this is a no-guilt program. Lots of people have gas, and the gas furnace you have is probably more efficient than the thing it replaced, so no issues there. But if you're thinking about doing a switch, it's worth planning ahead. Past director of Habitat for Humanity, a good friend of mine, his gas furnace went out about a month ago, and he had planned to go electric, but he hadn't put the wiring in to do it. And you don't want to be without heat for like a couple months while you're trying to find an electrician to come do your work. So we really find it so helpful, just get the quotes from the contractor now. Don't wait till it's dead, right? Because what will happen is if your gas water heater dies and you see the sticker on it, you call them up, say my gas water heater died, and Speedy water heater comes over, and the next day you have a gas water heater, right? If you had actually planned ahead, wired up that 30 amp circuit, then if it dies, or ideally before it dies, you just switch to an electric one. And electric water heaters, there's enough rebates out there from PGE and from others. They're under $1,000 now, and you can get a rebate from the federal tax credit. So that's how the program works. So what do we do as an organization? We're a nonprofit, right? We don't have much going on, but we do a few things. One is we provide trainings. The people who need to know this are not just homeowners, but like real estate agents, home inspectors, people who are trusted in the transaction process when you're trying to decide what do you do with this house. Also, real estate agents are gossipy. They like to be ahead of the trend, and so they're the perfect people to sort of know what's coming. Now it's become, Brian and I are doing a class tomorrow. It'll be like our 6th that we've done so far. It's become need-to-know information. We also have a Facebook group. Everyone's house is different, right? You got to be able to have a question. So there's 150 plus people on it. They're asking questions. They're getting their questions answered, unique to their situation. We also have, for low and moderate income residents, we have a program. We got a small grant from PSEF. So we're partnering with Clean Energy, got the name on here, CEP, Community Energy Project, and Verde Builds, to make these resources available to their clients. And when someone gets one part of their house electrified, maybe their heat pump, let them know what other resources are out there, because maybe there's money for insulation over here. All these nonprofits have all this money, but people don't know which ones have it. And also there's a translation issue, so we already have our science translated, but getting some of our materials translated into Spanish.
Do you really think all the houses are going to change?
I'm not sure let me get the question in, but houses will not change overnight, that's right.
Talking about apartments.
Apartments, yes, and we actually, one thing we do is you put out a blog, I'll get to your answer here, where we include, what are we hearing about? So for example, a lot of people, when it was in the news about ranges, so we wrote down a step-by-step, choose your own adventure, how to change to an electric range. It's on our website, the blog. People have been asking, what can renters do? Well, we put down 8 things renters can do, and that's on our most recent blog, and we included a sample letter you can send to your landlord about encouraging them to electrify your home, collectively home. and rebates they can access to do so. Once people go all the way and they electrify, then you get the sign, right? So electrify, certified renewable electric home. We have it in Spanish too. We have a business one. So we have some multifamily apartments that have got the certification. The new Galleria building in Portland got the certification. I know that we are, oh, and the other thing we provide is contractor referrals. And Electrify Now has some as well, because there are still contractors out there who will try and talk you out of electrifying your home. And that's unfortunate. And some of them have experience with past heat pumps from a decade ago that weren't as good, or they weren't really made to provide the cooling, which they do. I mean, I should say with all this electrification, it's not a step down, it's a step up. I mean, I have had an induction range for 9 years now, and I get impatient when I use anyone else's gas or resistance electric range. It just take forever. With heat pumps, it's like you have cooling, and when this wildfire smoke's out there and it's hot, you kind of want cooling without bringing in old air inside. The other thing we do, and I should say lastly, we're in Milwaukee, and Milwaukee's awesome. This program is branded in Portland, but we're in the whole region. I was actually just out here last week bringing a sign to someone who lives in Milwaukee. So if you don't care, we don't care. And I think that I should say one other thing on the we have on a resource from our website is a link. So there's great resources, Rewiring America, but that's a national program. So we have a nice table that compares Rewiring America rebates with what you can also get from the Energy Trust of Oregon to help cover those same costs. Yes, we have. Yeah, look at the blog lists or the where we've posted, because as we hear questions, then we want to respond to it. We do the best we can. So we have, and that's good. Thank you for bringing that up. We're tabling over here. We had little handouts, flyers, and the website is electrifypdx.org. Electrifypdx.org. We also have a QR code on the sign that would work if someone wants to geek out on that. And yeah, you can hand those out. Yep. Has my health improved? Well, I've got to say, I've lived in electric house for 9 years, and it's been okay. Yeah, we have 2 kids, 9 and 13, and our kids are doing well. These studies are across wide expanses of people. So even if I said my health sucked, you shouldn't believe like that was attributed to the house I live in. These are statistics, right? But I mean, I've heard plenty of anecdotes of people who have child. Oh, well, I like to save money. I like to help the planet. And those are my motivations. And I also like cooling. My health is good. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your concern. Any questions? And I don't know if I've used up my question, but if someone else has one, or we can go to the panel.
Yeah, we had the question, the card, I think, was about what the Facebook group is, or do you want to say that?
Well, if you just look up Electrify PDX on Facebook, you'll find it, and you can just sign up, and we'll have to approve you to get in there, and you can start asking questions.
If you don't use Facebook, can you find it on the city's website?
I wish the city of Portland had this on their website, but we have, go to Electrify PDX, and we have stuff on our website with resources, yeah. And there's another group. Brian Stewart is here from Electrify Now, and if you really want to dive deep on these issues, go to their website, because they also have, we're sister groups, and we could have been the same group. But it's, like if you want to get a webinar about all your heat pump options, go to their site for webinars on that. If you want to look at a webinar on renter options, they've got a great resource there. If you want to look about induction cooking by a professional chef, then they've got great resources. So there's also great resources on the Electrify Now website. I'm pointing to Brian Stewart is with Electrify Now. So he's here tabling too. And they've been doing this longer than we have. We're really a signage program mostly, but there's enough interest in having materials, so we want to put it on our site as well.
All right. Do folks have any other questions? We have around 10 minutes or so, if anyone has any more. If not, I can just ask. Okay, we have one right here.
I can speak to some of the things that you can do short of getting a new stove, because there are things you can do for your health that are free or cheap or easy. No, microwaves are fine. So one of the things that you can do is, instead of using your gas stove, use an electric appliance of some kind. So you can use an electric tea kettle or an Instant Pot or a microwave. As much as possible, cook with something electric. A second thing that you can do is anytime you cook, don't be like me. What I used to do was only turn my vent on when I cooked stinky fish. So don't be like me. Anytime you cook, always turn your vent on, okay? Because that's going to help your health. You may not know it, but it's helping your brain and your heart. You might not feel different, but it's helping you, okay? So turn on your vent, or if you don't have a properly functioning vent, open a window. You can put a fan in the window. The other thing you can do is cook on back burners, because your vent works better if you cook on back burners. The other thing you can do is, for a relatively inexpensive price, if you want to try out an induction hot plate, you can get these hot plates that plug right into a wall socket. Some people even put like a piece of wood or metal on top of their gas stove and just put the induction hot plate on top of it and use that instead of their gas stove. So think about an induction hot plate. You can get them lots of different places, including Amazon. Get a magnet. Now, why do you want a magnet? You need a magnet to figure out if your pots and pans are going to work on induction. So cast iron works great. Most stainless steel works great because it has enough of the ferrous material to be excited by the magnetic waves of induction. But some things like your favorite copper pot or something might not work, and at least you'll know that. And that might help you decide, do you want an induction stove, or do you want one of the still pretty damn good new electric stoves? They're not bad at all, those electric stoves. They're not the funny little orange rings, you know, that we used to have that were so terrible. These are smooth top. And they actually work fine, and they're a little less expensive right now than induction, although the price of induction is coming down. And then I think there was words of wisdom from Eli about planning ahead. Any of these things that you're going to do, you know, you might need a new 240 line for an induction stove. If what you have currently is gas, it's probably only hooked up to 120. Now, there are some funds through the IRA that could help you with that electrical thing. And there's also some new technology for induction stoves that have a battery in them that maybe won't need to have a 240 line, and that could actually work when the power is out. That's technology that's available right now only in the Bay Area, unfortunately, but might be coming here. So that's another thing that you can do.
So on the rebates and tax incentives, do they apply only to the homeowner or to someone that owns a rental as well?
Both. Correct me if I'm
Both?
wrong. Either
Okay.
way.
And then, so not all this is rolled out yet. So how do we stay informed about when things actually happen?
The tax credits are rolled out right now. They're available as of January 1st, and some people actually waited till January 1st of this year to put in their heat pump so they would qualify.
Yeah.
The state, the rebates, those are rolling out fall or early next year, you know?
Yeah.
There's not a quick timeline on that because the state has to figure out how, when you go up there, you have to show that you're income qualified and you immediately get paid less for this appliance on the spot at Lowe's or Home Depot. So that, they had a little more work to roll that out. You know what?
Yeah, that's basically as much as we know. A little bit more time, hopefully later this year, if not early next. And that's again for the upfront rebates, but things like the tax credits, you can access those now. And Eli was again pointing to the Rewiring America website, which has that tool I mentioned earlier to plug in. But part of what we're hoping for this legislative session is policy that will actually even further specify for Oregonians what they're eligible for. This is a great starting point in terms of timeline and what you can access given your income bracket and where you live. But we're hopeful to have that similar sort of one-stop shop based at the Oregon Department of Energy so that you can figure out not only what you're eligible for through the Inflation Reduction Act, but then through the Energy Trust of Oregon program or existing other state programs. So do keep the Oregon Department of Energy in mind, and they do already have a federal incentives website where they have some additional information in terms of rebates and tax incentives.
So tonight the talk is more about electricity, is that correct? And what about the whole keeping you from using up a lot of energy, because a lot of old homes that are way under insulated and all of that?
Yeah, so the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as other existing programs like ETO, also have incentives that support things like home weatherization and increased efficiency, so that when you're building or when you're thinking about improvements to your home, you're not only looking to electrify, but also make sure that you're using that electricity as efficiently as possible. So this is kind of a holistic approach, both in terms of the Inflation Reduction Act, but also in terms of some of the policies that the legislature is looking at this session. And I don't know, Eli or Bob, either of you want to add?
This idea of one-stop shopping, we'll put all of that stuff in one place, one website where you can go.
That'll be really nice.
Things are different in Eugene, and Portland, and Ontario, and Department of Energy.
Oh.
We're trying to get legislation to give them funding and set it up, but I expect that to happen.
And we would love your support on that legislation. SB 868 and HB 3166 are the relevant pieces. The Resilient Efficient Buildings Package is all you need to remember, but that's a big part of it. Yep, this is legislation that's state in the Oregon legislature.
I have a question about the rebates likely to roll out in *24. Are they going to be for a period of time or until the money's gone?
Yeah, so those
both?
unfortunately are not like the tax credits. It is a set amount of money. It is significant though, and as I mentioned, it is specifically targeting lower to moderate income households. But the tax credits you're eligible for regardless of income. But it is capped, and we want to make sure. Sorry, go ahead.
And where are the income guidelines?
Yeah, so that for now, Rewiring America is a great place to look.
Okay.
And again, it's dependent on where you live because it's based on median income in your area rather than something that's prescribed in the law itself. But that's where that calculator is great. And then again, as this one-stop shop hopefully is passed and is rolled out, you'll have even more specificity and guidance from the State Department of Energy.
I think that part of good contractors can tell you about this too. I mean, solar contractors have been doing this for years where they say, hey, your actual cost for this PV system is going to be this much less because it's eligible for all these incentives. Contractors are already starting to do that with HVAC equipment, heat pump water heaters, because that's part of their marketing. You know, they're saying that someone else is going to pay for part of your bill. That's great. The other thing to know is that there's on-bill financing. So even if the amount of money that comes out of pocket, through CRAFT 3, there is the availability of, you can borrow against your future utility bill, gas or electric utility bill, to cover the rest of the cost. And I'm surprised utilities our contractors aren't advertising about it. That program's been available for years, maybe even a decade. So look up CRAFT. I can share a link afterwards if you want. But CRAFT 3 is a local lender, Community Development Financial Institution, CDFI, and they have a loan product out there. You know, it's 6% or something like that, but it's like $100 origination fee. It's very inexpensive, and they provide financing for energy efficiency measures on your bill, which means there's not a separate payment to make. It basically shows up on your electric bill or gas bill.
I just have a really quick question about coil ovens. Is that emitting methane as well?
Coil.
A coil stove. It's like
Sounds like electric resistance.
Those are the electric, you know, like the little orange thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are electric, so they're not emitting methane.
Okay.
Yeah, those are electric.
Thank you.
Yeah. Only gas stoves emit methane.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or propane, probably too.
Or propane. Yeah.
We'll all be around afterwards too a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I got two. Yeah, so we're at time, but if you guys have more questions, please feel free to stay back for a bit and ask everyone who's here. And yeah, thank you guys all so much for being here this evening. We really appreciate